Welcome everyone to this Wolsey Hall Oxford homeschooling webinar for families with autistic children. We have families joining us from all around the world today, so a big welcome to you all. I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Amber Hussain and I am a Senior Admissions Officer here at Wolsey Hall Oxford. I am joined here today by a number of colleagues, both from our admissions and academic teams, who will be presenting or answering any of your questions that you might have today. Just to let you know before we get started that we are recording this webinar and we will send out a link of the recording to all of you via email in a few days. You'll be able to rewatch the event and also to share it with your family or friends as you like. We have a presentation to share with you today, given to you by our Learning Support Coordinator, Steph Williams, and our Supervisor of Primary Level Courses, Joe Ryman. After the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. You may find that some of the questions that you do initially have are going to be answered in the presentation itself. So therefore, please do not type any questions into the Q&A section until Steph and Joe have finished their presentation, as we won't be able to answer any questions that are posted early. So please do enjoy the presentation, and then I will let you know when we're going to start the Q&A. Handing over to you, Steph.
Thanks very much, Amber. Welcome to everyone that can make it today. And as Amber has said, this is going to be a short presentation, just thinking about how homeschooling can work for learners with autism. So I know that there'll be sort of lots of questions that are coming to mind. And I think as we walk through the presentation, it'll be good to think about your individual context. What is it that is happening at the moment? What is it that maybe mainstream school is or isn't offering? And what is it that you think might be different? Or what do you think you hope you could get from a homeschooling provision? So we're thinking about how homeschooling might better serve your child's needs. Maybe it's thinking about whether homeschooling can really help us reach those long-term educational goals. And then thinking more widely about the support systems that might need to be in place if we're moving into that homeschooling environment. So if we just have a little think, get ourselves into the context of what the world might look like when we're in school, and we've got autism, and we're thinking about some of the things that students have said to us. This is just a few captures of some of those comments that we know students are making. And it's kind of focusing on things like the noise in the environment, the distractions within the environment, and how that can be disruptive to focus and concentration. We also know sometimes it can be hard to keep up with the pace of the lessons, and that might intensify feelings of anxiety and stress. Also, we are aware, again, certainly from the feedback that we have with students, that there might be a feeling of not really being fully understood and not having those strategies in place that are going to help. And then finally, it's around the idea of feeling a bit isolated within the school environment, struggling to make those sort of connections with others. So when we think about this in our context at Wolsey Hall, what we feel is that it's always really great to focus on the things that learners are doing well. So we take the profile of autism, but we start to think about, well, what are the things that this individual is doing really well? And quite often what we find is by focusing on those key strengths, it really helps us to start to unlock or work with the difficulties and challenges that might be faced. So we know that there's good hyperfocus. We know that a student with autism can actually, where interest is high, can stay motivated and focused on a task for an extended period of time. There's excellent attention to detail, which again, if we start to think about how this is important to learning, we know these are tools that make us really successful. Retention of knowledge is there, and being able to thrive where there is routine and structure. So that's thinking about that wider environment. And then again, in terms of those sort of learning thinking skills, it's about that higher order thinking, the ability to be logical and reasoned, which again is quite up there in terms of higher order thinking. So that's what we might pop on as those super fat powers. And then in terms of the challenges and the difficulties that might be faced, we know that there's sensory sensitivities. We know that lights and textures and sounds and all of those things that come in a social environment can be quite overwhelming. We know that there might be repetitive behaviours, and that could lead to rituals and routines that could take a significant portion of time to complete. There's emotional dysregulation, which is leading to quite high anxiety, and then difficulties around planning and organisation. We also know within that social context that it might be quite difficult to read some of the non-verbal cues that are coming from others. And then also, as part of autism, there might be a resistance to the demands and requests that are placed upon us, which we know will come very frequently in an educational environment. That said, we know that autism is very unique. So we're not considering this as a sort of one size fits all kind of response. So information is telling us absolutely that no two individuals with autism will present in exactly the same way. We also know that the situation might have a complexity to it where there's more than one condition coexisting. And then the other part that we're seeing from research is that the environment is playing a really significant role to how autistic tendencies can be managed. So at Wolsey Hall, the way that we approach this is we say, let's focus on the individual need for that learner. So let's look at what's going on in the world of that person and think about the challenges and the difficulties that might be there and start to remove those barriers. So we're starting to look at the things, those individual needs, and how we can help to remove the barriers that are in the way. And what we're trying to do is equip learners with that toolkit that's going to help them to be really successful on their learning journey. And with that, that comes around building confidence and resilience in everything that we do. So if we consider that sort of question, why mainstream school might not be working, and again, we've got a capture here of some of the things that students are saying. So mentioning that pace of lesson is just a bit too fast, and it's not leaving enough time to really process and get that depth of understanding. It could be that there's been significant gaps in learning. There might have been parts of schooling that have been missed, and that's adding to that level of sort of confusion. We also know, with sort of hand in hand with anxiety, that there might be real physical symptoms experienced where the student's just feeling really not well enough to go to school. And then again, back to that idea of the social context in terms of the way in which others are maybe interacting with us might be difficult. And then again, we've got the idea of the environment itself and those sensory stimulus that can be triggering. So in terms of the impact, we might see that there's high levels of frustration with the school environment. And this might over time have led to a bit of disengagement, where there's sort of low motivation towards learning, a bit of a switch off. And also there might be that part where confidence has gone quite low and not feeling that there's capability in being able to move through those subjects and that learning content. In terms of those gaps and the missing education, we know that there might be a bit of delayed academic progress because of that. And also what we're seeing is students quite often find themselves in a continued sort of stress response. So it's a sort of perpetual state of anxiety, and that could be on various scales of intensity, but it's sort of locked into this sort of almost fight or flight response. So then we ask ourselves the question of how homeschooling might be able to help. And what we've seen from students at Wolsey Hall is really feeling that this has been a game changer for them, knowing that they can work at their own pace and they don't feel that rush and that pressure of trying to keep up all the time. Likewise, we know that distractions from the environment are going to be minimized because we're in a situation where we can make those choices about how and where we want to learn. And then there's plenty of resources that are available that might help. I mentioned, sort of removing barriers. And we know that the students will have access to some of those helpful resources that are going to improve that toolkit for learning. So the benefits of homeschooling are going to be customized learning pace, flexible scheduling, reduced sensory overload, the ability to maintain a stable routine and have predictability when we're moving through the learning, and then creating that safe and stable environment for learning to take place. So at Wolsey Hall, we have a dedicated learning support team. There's 6 people in that team, and they offer one-to-one sessions with students. This is an additional service that we offer where students can come and work with a member of the team on a one-to-one basis. We provide 30-minute sessions, and they can be booked individually or as a block booking. And there's a wide range of support available. You can see there that there is a really good depth of specialism within the team to be able to work with students that have got lots of different experiences. More widely, we do have other services to help, and I'll come on to that in a little moment. From our students that have used these services, that have worked with our one-to-one specialists, we know that on reflection, families have talked about the idea that they've seen their child gaining confidence, building up that self-esteem that maybe has taken a little bit of a knock. So the ability to work at the own pace, to be able to complete tasks, is all making us feel better. We have seen that families report their child feeling much happier, feeling that they're able to come out of their shell a little bit, start to say, get that confidence back in the approach to learning, building up those positive experiences. And also this last point that a family made was that ability to find a really meaningful connection with another person. So striking up that relationship with the one-to-one learning support tutor has been really beneficial for some of our families and some of our learners. So if I just talk you through the way in which we approach support for our students, we take a tiered approach. So at our first level, this is the kind of, by its very nature, Wolsey Hall is offering a universal way of learning. So students have the flexibility and the autonomy to approach subjects at their own pace and the way that they want to study within the kind of life of the course. The resources that we offer, the course content that we offer, is designed in a universal way to make sure that all learning preferences and needs are supported within that content. So students can start to choose the way in which they want to access the curriculum content through different resources such as videos and reading, and looking at tasks, reinforcing knowledge through tasks. So there's a real menu of learning activities. Our qualified tutors are offering individual support and feedback in the written assignments, from the written assignments, and that's giving that a level of personalisation that is so important to knowing how to progress and on those actions, those feed forward actions. We also have a support for learning course that all students will have access to at the start of their studies. And that's the bank of resources that build up the toolkit. So there's lots of information there around various strategies and tools that are going to help students be successful in their learning. And that could be from how do I effectively respond to questions, to how can I manage my time? What do I do to create my study schedule? How can I manage feelings of anxiety? So it's a whole host of information and resources there that students will have access to from the start. When we get to our tier 2, this is where the student progress manager that is assigned to the student will be helping signpost into some targeted resources. So it will be those conversations where maybe on review, we're starting to highlight that there might be this challenge or this barrier. And the SPM will be working with students, say, well, if you had a little look at this, this is a resource that's on our support for learning course. I think this will be helpful to you. So we get a little bit of targeted intervention there. And then up at our tier 3, this is where I spoke about the learning support team that offer those one-to-one sessions as an additional service, and that's available. So hopefully that shows that wide range of support that is available. And then really we sort of ask ourselves the question, this is definitely the reflections that we have, what happens when we as educators and families prioritise for well-being in children? And what we're seeing is when we put well-being at the heart of everything that we do, it starts to unlock those barriers. So those things that seemed difficult and challenging before, we start to see that transformation where really what we're doing is we're creating a space for a child to kind of reset and be in that calm zone, be able to know that there's predictability. If we come back to some of those things that we say, we're removing some of the trigger points that maybe have led to the high state of anxiety. We're making sure that the child isn't in that continual fight or flight. And by reducing that down, by creating this really positive sense of well-being, it means that we're creating a way in which the child is going to be free to start to focus again on learning and digesting that information and moving forward. In the surveys that we've done with parents, the kind of key things that have come up is the idea that this is a tailored approach rather than it being one size fits all. We know that families are reporting that their children are feeling much happier in this learning environment, that it's really working for them. And again, it's that idea that we've got this building of self-confidence where maybe it might have had a knock before. We're moving to that moment where the child is definitely feeling that they've got more capabilities and focus and motivation on being able to engage with that learning journey. So hopefully that tells you a little bit about what the way that we approach learning support within Wolsey Hall and how we like to help students with those varying difficulties and challenges. So what I'd like to my lovely colleague Joe, he's going to talk you through more widely about the Wolsey Hall journey. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you very much for that overview. I just wanted to talk through the phases in the Wolsey Hall journey because different numbers mean different things in different education systems. So our Wolsey Hall journey starts in lower primary, which is for students typically aged 3.5 to 4 years old, up until 7. And the year groups that are covered there are year 1, year 2, and the getting ready for, which is pre-year 1 courses. And that's followed by the upper primary phase. And this is typically for students aged 7 to 11. And it covers years 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then followed is the lower secondary phase. And that's for students typically aged 11 to 14. And that covers years 7, 8, and 9. Now, this top layer, this lower primary, upper primary, and lower secondary, each of those year groups represent one academic year. So if a student was studying year 5 English, that would be the equivalent in a mainstream school of covering one academic year. And something that Steph alluded to earlier was that we can be flexible in our enrolment. So it could be that your student is ready for English in one year group, but maths in another year group, and we're flexible with the ability to be able to enroll students on different levels within the subjects. Now, we're often asked how many subjects should my student study, and you can see the little green ovals there, which gives a very baseline number of subjects that your student might study. But of course, that depends on circumstances. So if Wolsey Hall was your main source of education, we might suggest that you enroll in more subjects. Otherwise, sometimes families come to us and say, oh, but I'm actually studying French down the road and I'm having music lessons with somebody locally. Then our advice would change. And our admissions team are very experienced and always very willing to book a call to discuss your students' individual circumstances. So after the top layer there, the top line, comes the examination phases, which cover 2 academic years. So you have the GCSE or the IGCSE phase. The I simply stands for international, gives a bit more of an international flavour to a subject. And the GCSE, IGCSE phase covers years 10 and 11. Typically, students there are 14 to 16. And we've got 5 subjects there, 5+ subjects. And that very much depends, again, on your students' goals, students' abilities. For example, if a student was expecting or wishing to get into a highly competitive university, then maybe we would be recommending maybe 9, 10 IGCSEs. But that's something that we would discuss on a family consultation in our admissions call. Students, if they were in the UK schools, they maybe take 7, 8, 9 subjects if they're capable. So that gives you a kind of idea, perhaps. Other students, if they don't have the ability, may only take 3 or 4 subjects, maybe 2. So it very much depends on circumstances, and that's where Wolsey Hall's flexibility is very useful for learners with different needs. From the IGCSE phase, so it comes the A-level phase, and that's another 2-year programme of study. And A-levels are usually 3 subjects, perhaps 4 subjects, depending on your student. The IGCSE, GCSE and A-level phase are all examined at the end of that 2-year period in external, with external examinations in an external examination setting. So that's very much like a traditional school would be there. A-levels are a deeper level of learning, where subjects are studied in a much greater depth. Now, for all of the subjects that you can study at all of these different phases, if you go to the courses on our website, you'll be able to see the subjects that are available for each of those phases. So we're a Cambridge International School. We offer Cambridge courses marked by the Cambridge Assessment International Education. We're also a Pearson Virtual Centre as well, and we cover the English National Curriculum. We have so many courses that we would advise which aspects of those were covered on our website to make sure that you understand fully. So how do our courses work? As Steph said, there's lots of flexibility with our courses to be able to accommodate individual learners' needs. So all of our courses are housed on a password-protected, secure learning platform that parents have access to. And as you can imagine, different phases of education require different amounts of parental support. So with our primary phases, those courses are written for the parents and they would support their student throughout the courses. When students get to lower secondary, the courses are written for the student, and IGCSE, GCSE and A-level are the same. But we would always suggest that parents support their students to make sure that the learning is as you would expect and that you're able to challenge and inspire your learners too. So whether you're 4 or whether you're 18, there are some key elements of our courses that remain the same. So assignments run throughout the courses, and these vary in their content. If you're 4, obviously you're not going to be writing huge amounts of work. That may be a video recorded or audio recorded, some phonics that they've been learning. Whereas if you're looking at the A-levels or the lower secondary, then obviously you will be writing a whole lot more. But that can be all of our lessons, because there are no live lessons, all of our lessons students can take breaks whenever they need. So we don't have an online timetable. You would decide that. So we would give you the number of hours that you needed to spend each day, and you would decide when was best for your student, taking breaks as appropriate. So the course may have activities that you're working through. Maybe it's quite a lengthy piece of work and you think that's not going to work for my students. So that would be up to you to decide how the breaks would work for your student there. Most of our courses are supported by textbooks and they get shipped out to you. There are quizzes on the course as well, which act as very good revision activities to be able to go back to. And that is sometimes they're in subscription sites. So we sometimes have those quizzes may be our own that we've devised, maybe part of the subscriptions that is included in the course fee. So many of our courses are supported by videos, and that helps your student to be able to press pause, replay, or share with you what's been learned, so that there is that ability to be able to stop and start study periods. We're very conscious that we don't want students online all of the time, so our Courses are a combination of on and offline activities so that they are not too screen-based. But the assignments, as I say, are a common theme. And those assignments are punctuated through the course. They are marked by the Wolsey Hall tutor that Steph mentioned earlier. They would give a percentage grade, a good positive praise, some feedback so that the student knows and you know as a parent what your student's doing well. And then perhaps some next steps to be enabled to extend or move on your student's learning. So the tutors who mark those are also available to be emailed from our learning platform if your student is or you are concerned about something, or if something's not quite clicking in their mind, then you're very welcome to ask your tutor for further advice. Now, all of our courses are designed to develop autonomy. Students take ownership of their learning, obviously, progressing with their ages, and that's all part of our Wolsey Hall ethos, that we're developing independence that students can carry through post-education as well as whilst they're working with Wolsey Hall. So a student can take, as I say, as any number of subjects, but we would always be very mindful of the other studies that students are undertaking. We would always recommend that the core subjects are a minimum, and core subjects are English, maths and science, but obviously that depends on your student's age and stage of education. Our admissions team, very experienced team, would be delighted to have a call and discuss your individual students' situation and circumstances with them to make sure that you're fully understand the options available. So in terms of adding subjects, you can add subjects within the first 45 days at the moment. So that means that if perhaps you're slightly concerned that your student isn't going to manage the studies, you might decide we're just going to start with English, maths and science. And if it's working well, then you can add subjects on or courses on within those 45 days. And so that gives you a good flexible period to see how your student adjusts to Wolsey Hall courses. So generally students start at their age appropriate year group, but we have some level placement checks which will help you to determine which is the correct entry level. And as I said earlier, it may be that your student is studying one level for English and maybe a different level because they have a particular flair in maths, for example, and so they're ready to start maths at a different level. And that flexibility allows students to be able to feel that they're really achieving and that they can, extend the subjects that they are achieving in and perhaps build up those subjects that perhaps they're not so confident with. And as I said, our admissions team would be able to share the level placement checks for you to be able to look at those skills that are required for the entry levels and determine the correct level for your student. We also have a 45-day transfer period. So if you find a subject or a course is too hard or too easy for your student, you can transfer to a different level for the cost of new textbooks and shipping. So that gives you some flexibility in those first 45 days too. Now, Steph's mentioned the UK qualified tutors, but just to reiterate that they mark all of the assignments that are submitted by your student and give advice on strengths and the next steps in learning. Depending on age, there are some virtual meetings. Depending on students' age, they come at different times depending on ages, but they're all available on our Canvas learning platform if you need to ask or answer questions. My nephew works with Wolsey Hall, and sometimes if we're stuck with something, we take a photo of the particular aspect we're stuck with and send it to the tutor so that they know exactly what it is that he's stuck with, and we get voice notes perhaps, or we had a tailor-made video for some chemistry recently, which was incredibly helpful. So the other member of the Wolsey Hall team, very experienced member of Wolsey Hall team, is the student progress manager, and she or he will help you to create an assignment schedule to keep your student on track. So there are generally 36 weeks of study over 52 weeks that your course fee is valid for. And so the student progress manager will help you decide when it's convenient for your assignments to be submitted. We don't have term dates, we don't have holiday dates at Wolsey Hall. There are certain dates for GCSE and A-level courses that are a little bit more stringent because of the external examinations that follow. But generally, you're able to set your assignment schedule that's going to be flexible and work around your circumstances. Student progress manager will check in with you as well to make sure that you're progressing. And as Steph said, she or he is often able to give you some advice if you've got something that you're particularly worried about. So a good email backup there too. So we offer external courses, GCSE and A-level courses culminate in external examinations. And we have an exams officer who's able to help signpost you to a local examination centre. You may need to travel in some instances because some Cambridge centres are not always completely local. We have students in 130 countries, so that varies obviously depending on location. But we would be able to support you with the selection or finding of those. And we have the Cambridge and Pearson examination centres. So the additional support for families, we have, obviously, Steph has mentioned the learning support and wellbeing service. We have a career and university advisory service, and a reference service, which are paid for services. And we also have the school community. The school community, there is a forum that students are able to enrol on once they are 10 years old and above. We also have a Facebook group that parents are able to connect with. And we're also able to, if you have any doubts or any concerns, it's always useful to speak to a family that's currently studying with Wolsey Hall. It may be about the country that you're living in or your child's particular needs. So we'd be able to connect you with somebody that is working with Wolsey Hall or studying with Wolsey Hall already. And so you can actually ask them any questions that you have after this presentation. So thank you very much. I shall pass you back to Amber, who will start the Q&A session.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks, Steph. So we do hope that you have found the presentation helpful and that Jo and Steph provided a good overview of Wolsey Hall Oxford and the support that we can provide to students with autism. As Jo said, it's now time for the question and answer session. So please ask your questions by typing them into the Q&A area, which you can find at the bottom of your screens. When typing a question, please include the age of your child and the level of study and your country. This kind of information really helps our team to answer your questions fully, and we'll try our best to answer as many questions as possible in the time available. Do please note that we will not be answering questions that are very unique to your child today. For these types of very specific questions that you might have, please do submit an inquiry form on our website, and our admissions team will get in touch to arrange an online meeting or a phone call to discuss your child's studies in detail. We'll show you where you can find the inquiry form at the end of the webinar. But now we will answer some questions via the Q&A channel and also some live. So I would like to bring you back to Steph and to Jo, who look forward to answering some of your questions today. And I've got a few pre-questions that have already been sent in lined up already. First, really good question. Is homeschooling legal for autistic children? I don't know who wants to start with that one.
Yes, absolutely it is. We definitely would recommend looking at the guidance within your country, but absolutely there are no legal restrictions on being able to homeschool a child, and particularly a child with a diagnosis of autism.
Thanks, Steph. Couple of questions about sort of social integration. So what support is there for social integration, or how will my child interact with other students?
So Joe mentioned there some of the communities that we have at Wolsey Hall. There's lots of clubs that are available and they are always expanding. So that's a great way to pursue individual interests that students might have. We've also got the forum that students can use. This is at a particular age, and the great thing about the forum is that there's lots of personalizations there. So the individuals can be interacting and families can be interacting with the forum in a way with, with certain restrictions that might be helpful. So there are those opportunities which we make available for learners to be able to start to make those social connections with others. And I think certainly the positive reflections that we've had from students is that ability to sort of connect with somebody that's in a similar situation to themselves. Again, if we come back to those points that I was mentioning about sort of building confidence and esteem and being able to make those positive interactions, those student forums and the community groups that we've got, the clubs that we've got, have been really successful in doing so. And there are ways as well in which parents can connect with other parents and families, which is also been quite useful as well. So I'm not sure if I missed anything off there.
No, I think you've done really well. They're the Facebook group, I know quite often there's a response that says join our WhatsApp group. So I'm guessing that parents have made their own WhatsApp groups externally from having been connected on our network in the first place. So there's also that. And when I've spoken to students in the past, that they've had some kind of live sessions between themselves that they've organised, so not Wolsey Hall related. So there's that aspect, that there are parents, lots of parents feel the same. They want to have this connection, outside of school, if you like. So I feel that that's quite a common concern, if you like.
Yeah, you're right, definitely, Joe. There's certainly lots of networking that does take place that we don't necessarily know about, and there are different WhatsApp groups that parents set themselves up with. Okay, couple of similar questions. Do we have students with EOTAS packages?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we're definitely seeing this. You might have had a little look at those trends at the beginning of the presentation, but I think certainly within the last year, we're really seeing that move into homeschooling for students that have ETAS packages, also students with EHCPs. We're working a bit with schools as well, where schools are using Wolsey Hall as the alternative provision. So there's actually lots of different ways that we're working with local authorities and, like I say, schools as well, to make sure that it's really at the heart of this, it's finding that thing that is going to be the right space, the right place for children to be able to flourish. And it's really lovely that there is those possibilities, that it doesn't have to be, if you come back to some of those points before, it's that it's not one size fits all, and finding that really unique way that is going to be beneficial for your child is something that is really important. So yeah, certainly we're working with children with the HCPs and with the ETAS packages as well.
Great, thanks, Steph. Hopefully that's answered a couple of those questions. Just a couple of general questions. Does Wolsey Hall have a trial period? Joe, you've touched on the 45-day period in the presentation. I don't know if you want to just clarify that.
Will do. So on our website, there is actually course samples. They have either a module if it's lower secondary and above courses, so sort of students that are older than 11 years old, or if they have a week's worth of lessons if it's for the lower primary and the primary courses. So there's I often say to parents when I meet them on calls, try out the samples for your student and set yourself some time aside to see, is this going to work for us? Is this what I expected? How will it work for us? What sort of time will I need? If I work all day, is this going to work for us? So those samples are not a trial period, but they are a good beginning period to be able to check what exactly you receive with Wolsey Hall. But as Amber said, there's 45 days as well that we have as a period that following that point, if the courses aren't working for you, that you can have a refund of most of your course fees. So there is a £95 registration fee, which isn't non-refundable. There's an admin fee, I think £50, Amber, is that correct? Yeah.
That's
And
£50. Sorry, it's £50 for non-exam courses. So that would be primary and lower secondary. It's £75 for IGCSE and A level.
thank you very much. And the cost of the textbooks as well is non-refundable. So there is some of your course fee would be refunded within the 45 days, but you have to remember those charges would be payable if you cancelled within the 45 days.
Thanks. I think that's covered a couple of those questions. Thank you so much, Jo. Another question just regarding the curriculum. How is the curriculum tailored to meet the needs of autistic children? Can it be adjusted to suit a child's pace?
Yeah,
Really good question. Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry, Jo, you go. No, you go first. That's good.
Well, all of our courses are self-paced. So for students that maybe they're finding particular elements really easy, then you can revise those elements and perhaps move on, not covering every single part of that lesson. I've loved that with my nephew, because when we've met something that he's learned before, we've just revised it, checked it, moved on. On occasions that it's more difficult, we've spent longer perhaps than Wolsey Hall as we would have normally allocated, but that's the benefit of having that self-paced learning, that students can take breaks when they need to, that they can repeat work if they need to. I always, with my textbooks, I always put post-it notes in throughout the textbooks, so that if it's been a super easy concept, we put a green post-it note in. If it's been a bit tricky but okay, we put an orange, and if it's been really difficult, we put a red note, so that you've always got that ability to be keeping note of your students' concepts that they've found difficult, so you can go back and revise those. So the ability to be able to work at self-paced is one absolute beneficial factor. But if, for example, your student struggles to write, then we would support scribed. So perhaps you'll be doing shared writing, or perhaps you've got a goal that you still want your student to be able to write, but you're going to share that writing to make it less frustrating in the interim. But over a period of months, you're going to withdraw that support, or you're going to lessen that support, so that your student achieves, but is still developing but succeeding. So hopefully reducing some of the potential frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. And by design, the courses are there. The course content is there to make sure that there's a varied menu of the way in which students can access the curriculum content. So that means that it can be very much working to preference. We know that some of us are very good with seeing visuals and colours and pictures, and that information is available. Likewise, there is also the activities that require book reading, which again might be the strength. I think the wonderful thing about there being this range of activities to access learning means that it doesn't necessarily always come down to preference. It might come down to mood as well. There might be days, absolutely, that we're just feeling that sense of tiredness. So being able to find something that allows us to progress and move forward in our learning in a way that is digestible is going to be really beneficial. So by its very design, the courses are structured in a way and offer content in a way that will play to all of those learning preferences. And I think really fundamentally, there's this autonomy at the start of it. There's this level of choice that it's, I can decide, obviously with the support of the SPM and parents, it's I can decide what I want to do. How do I want to learn today? What is my best period of time for learning as well? We often know that for some learners, 9 o'clock in the morning is not going to be conducive. So we can shift the pattern of study, which again builds a way in which we can move forward and progress and start to enjoy learning again. It might be that there's certain subjects that the interest is there and lesser so for other subjects. So we can mix it up, maybe building the momentum by starting with that subject that is the interest-led one. Or maybe it's the bit where we say, well, let's start with the one that we're less excited about. So we then do that bit first, and then we move on to the bit where the passion and the excitement is. So all of those flexibilities are really they're really playing to the strengths and challenges that a child with autism might have, and also that wider environment of being able to select a space in which I want to work in that doesn't have noises and distraction is going to be really helpful. We do have just to follow on with what Jo said about scribing, at secondary level, there is an opportunity for students to be typing assignments rather than handwriting, which would be the standard expectation. So certainly with a child that has a diagnosis of autism, that would be or could be their normal way of working. So we really want to make sure that whatever individuals are doing at secondary feeds forward to what the exam access arrangements they might require a little bit later on at GCSE and A level. So if typing is that normal way of working, we would put that compensation in straight away.
That's really insightful. Thanks, Steph. We are coming to the end of the session now, so I hope that the answers that Steph and Jo have provided have been really useful. Jo, it's really, really insightful to hear you talk about you not just as you're a member of the Wolsey Hall team on the staff side, but you've got the experience because you've got family members that are actually studying with us. So it's really, really nice to hear that you've kind of got both sides there. So thank you for that, and I hope everyone enjoyed your answers there. You can find out more if you still have any questions about homeschooling with Wolsey Hall Oxford, or would like to discuss your child's studies with one of our admissions officers. On the Wolsey Hall website, you can complete an inquiry form by pressing on the Contact Us button, which is located at the top right of the page, and then you can click on the blue Submit Admissions Inquiry Form button too. Our admissions team will then send you some course information and arrange a meeting or a phone call, as Jo has mentioned, so that you can give specialist advice about subjects and course levels. Admissions might also recommend some level placement checks or checklists to help you to decide on the most appropriate level of study for your child in each of the chosen subjects. Admissions can also connect you to Steph and the learning support team if you would like to have an initial consultation prior to enrolling as well. And Steph is also on hand to send out any additional learning support information as you consider Wolsey Hall courses. So finally, thank you so much to Jo and to Steph for the presentation today. We hope that you have found this session useful and that it's given you a really good understanding of Wolsey Hall and the homeschooling and support that we offer. As I mentioned earlier, we have recorded the webinar, so you will receive that. If you have missed anything, you'll get it by email too. Thank you very much and have a lovely rest of the day. Take care.